So, hi and good morning, everybody. It's actually raining in Ireland today, and I always start my conversation with the weather in Ireland. We had such an amazing weather for the past few months, and God has been blessed us. But unfortunately, today is not the best. But it's always good to have a bit of rain when it's right. So today I have an amazing guest, and like I say, I always are so thankful about the people who give their time to me. And I just want to welcome you today to the Growing channel. And we are going to have an amazing conversation with Pat Brown from Dublin. Now, I don't want to introduce Pat Brown myself because I would do a disservice to what he is and what he's doing. I will let you hear about himself. But before we go there, Pat was introduced to me by Nigel, you see. So there's a power of connection, power of networking, and power of relationship. And I just want to say welcome, Pat, to the Growing channel. And today we are having an amazing conversation about yourself, about your life. And I just want to thank God because when I read a little bit about your biography in this little booklet here, it was really fascinating. I was like, I just want to dive into that journey with you, right?
Sure.
So please tell us a little bit about yourself. Hello, Pat, and who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm Pat Brown, and you would like to hear about my childhood?
Yeah, so who you are.
Yeah,
and
I'm Pat Brown. I'm married to Kaz, and we've had 3 children, and we've got 8 grandchildren, and I'm not going to try and remember their ages, the grandchildren's ages, but my eldest granddaughter.
You be forgiven.
Yeah, my eldest granddaughter. She's married now, and she's 23 or 24, I think.
Yeah,
Jodie.
yeah.
And the youngest is Brooke, and I think he is 8, maybe. I probably got that wrong, but anyway, that's from the eldest to the youngest.
Yeah.
So we've got 8 of them, and they're beautiful kids, and so are our children beautiful as well.
Of course.
I work I'm semi-retired now. I used to work cleaning cars, and it was my business. I used to employ a few people at one time, but then the business downsized, and then we're sort of getting to that age now where we need to take it a bit easier. That's who I am.
So we got this. I mean, we got to know each other through Nigel.
Yeah,
Okay, so Nigel and you are friends for a long time now. Obviously,
Yes.
you're part of the Christian Motorbike
That's right,
Association
yeah,
and everything.
yeah.
But Nigel felt I need to have a conversation with you because he's blessed by you, right? He's been blessed and he adored the relationship you have with each other. But before we go into whatever we want to discuss about what you're doing here in Ireland, in Dublin, I want you to walk me through your childhood, growing up in I think you were born here and then your parents moved to the UK, and then you came back, you were brought up with your grandparents. So tell me a little bit more about
Sure.
that journey, what it was like growing up with
Yeah.
your grandparents.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was born in Yorkshire, actually.
Yorkshire,
Yeah.
sorry, apart, yeah.
And my parents decided to give me to my grandparents to raise. And they lived in the west of Ireland, Ballinasloe, County Galway. And I think I was about 3 years of age when I was handed over to them. And I loved my childhood. I loved my grandparents. I think I was a bit of a rascal, growing up. Got up to lots of mischief. But when I reflect back on my childhood, they were happy days,
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't like about my childhood was going to school.
Yeah, that was the funny part. When I read it, I was like, I need Pat to let me know about this. What is the story about you running away to go back to your parents because you didn't want to go to school?
Yeah.
That's always the reverse, though.
Yeah. So what happened there was, like school, back then, like the teachers would beat you, physically beat you, with
I grew up
sticks.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they kind of put fear into you, and I had this fear. Like when I used to go to school, when I go into the actual school itself, when I walk through the doors, my stomach would go into a knot. I'd get these butterflies sort of feeling in my stomach.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That bad?
That bad, yeah.
Yeah.
And even the smell of the school, like, the smell of chalk and that type of thing. In fact, I remember when my kids went to a school in Clondalkin Village, I remember I had to go down there once to collect my daughter, and I went into the school, and the smell of the classroom or the smell of the school sort of brought all that back to me, So it had a big effect on me. So, yeah, I hated school because I feared school,
Okay. Wow.
the way we were taught, they would sort of beat it into you, especially they want us to speak Gaelic, and they would sort of beat that into you,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I went to school there, but outside of school, I was happy. I was a happy kid,
Yeah.
I used to play with my mates up the fields and rivers and, did all the things that a country child would do,
Yeah.
And then when I was about 13, yeah, it was we were on our summer holidays, from school, and it was time to go back to school at the end of the summer holidays. And again, I started getting. I didn't know what depression was back then, but I felt low in myself, and I thought, "Hang on, this is crazy. I don't want to go back." I was 13. The age to leave school back then was 14.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long ago was this? Because when
That
you
was-
hear about that you were being beaten up in school, or you were, so someone will be like, "What, Ireland? You look quite young, so I need people to know that it's not happening in Ireland at the moment." How long ago was it?
Well, I'm 70 now.
Okay, so that was quite a while ago. Yeah.
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 And that's just the way it was, I think I wasn't the only kid that hated school,
Yeah.
And if you weren't too bright, you would sort of be put into an area where you were told that you're not very good. You're in B area, whereas they would split the classroom up into two groups, A and B, And I was always in B, But anyway, when it was time to go back to school, I didn't know how to get out of going back. And so I came up with this idea. At this time, my parents had moved back to Ireland, and they lived in Dublin with my other brothers and sisters. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters apart from me. I was the eldest.
Yeah.
So I thought the only way I can get out of going back to school is if I write to them and tell them that I want to live with them.
Okay.
And I didn't really want to live with them because I was happy where I was.
Yeah.
And so I sacrificed my happiness that I had as a child in Ballinasloe to go to them, so to get out of school.
Yeah.
And so I moved up there with them, up here, should I say, to Dublin.
Yeah.
And I lived with them for about 3 years. I got a job in the local butcher shop in Tala Village, or not Tala Village, Coolock Village.
Okay.
And I used to deliver meat on a push bike. And then the guy that owned the shop told me that he was going to, give me an apprenticeship to be a butcher. And I kind of started learning that trade,
Okay.
But unfortunately, those years weren't very happy years, because my father was mentally ill.
Okay.
And it wasn't very nice. I won't go into too much detail.
Of course, yeah.
But it wasn't very nice. And then one time he went away for a short period of time. I think he went to England. And when he was away, things were different, There was kind of peace in the house, and it was really nice. And one evening, or one night, I had a dream actually that he came back. And in my dream, he was standing outside of a church in Coolock Village. And in my dream, I was coming home from my lunch on my push bike. And right enough, the next day, it was Friday, the next day, when I was really, I wasn't dreaming now, I was going home, and there he was standing outside of
Oh my word.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I went back to my mother and I says, Mom, he's home. And she says, I know. I says, Ma'am, I can't stay here. I can't live here any longer. I'm getting out of here. And so I told her my plan. I would go to England, you
Okay.
know, and she was the only one that knew where I was going. So I knew that when I went back to work, I wasn't coming home that evening. So I went back to work, and one of the guys, when work was finished, he brought me into a train station, and I got a train to Ballinasloe. And one of my friends in Ballinasloe gave me enough money to go to England.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was 16 at this stage.
Okay.
So I ran away to England. Didn't know what to expect. I went to Yorkshire, to a little place called Haworth, outside of Keighley in Yorkshire. And my uncle stayed there, you know. And I lived with him for a while, and I got a job in a textile mill until my father found out where I was, you know. And he came over, and he found out where I was living. At this stage, actually, I left my uncle's place, and I was living in a little bedsit in Keighley village.
Yeah.
You know. And well, I was getting off the bus, and I heard a voice behind me. "You're in a hurry, aren't you?" And it was him. And again, a fear came over me.
Okay.
Again, I won't go into too much detail, but he came back to Ireland, but he had threatened me that that I was underage and he was going to bring me home.
Okay. Yeah.
And I didn't give him a chance to, because I fled to London. And when I went to London, I didn't have a clue
What you were going
what I was
to
going
do.
to,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was I was told that when you go to London, go to the social welfare and they will sort you out. And I went in that ignorant, you know, down to London. And I remember getting there, and I got a bus down there. And when I got there, I remember sitting on a park bench, not knowing where to go. And someone directed me to, I went to the police station,
Oh, okay.
you know,
Yeah.
and at this stage, the social welfare places were all closed, you know, it was closed down. It was the evening time.
Yeah.
So they directed me to a Salvation Army place. And I went to stay there, but one of the guys in the Salvation Army place, he thought I was too young to stay in that environment. And he brought me to a place in Camden Town in London called the Irish Centre. And when I got there, I felt a little bit more at ease because I was with Irish people,
Yeah.
you know. But I kind of got in with the wrong company, and I'm cutting a long story short now, you know. We got thrown out of the Irish Centre, you know. And then I ended up on sleeping rough, you know,
Yeah.
sleeping park benches. And I remember sleeping in a derelict building. We used to call it the Polygon building. That was the name before it was sort of derelict, you know. I think it might have been flats at one stage.
Okay.
And I was hanging out with these guys from Scotland. They were winos, you know, they were alcoholics, these people, you know.
Yeah.
And I was living with them, and I didn't think about life, or I didn't feel sorry for myself as far as I was concerned.
You were having.
This is where I am now,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. You didn't have time to. You were in survival mode. Yeah.
Yeah, I
you have time
was.
to think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going hungry for days. We used to steal food from the train station, you know. I remember queuing up for. You'd go into the restaurant part, and you would get a tray, and work along the queue, heading towards the cash the cash out, and picking up all the sandwiches and putting them on the tray, and then pretending that there was someone calling you at the door, and I'd say, "Yeah, okay, I'll be there now," and running over to the door,
Yes.
and legging it then, you know,
Yeah.
with a pocket full of sandwiches, you know.
Yeah.
And they tasted so good because we were hungry. I think
was
they said
fun.
something like that in the Proverbs, that
Yeah.
stolen food tastes.
Yes.
There's a proverb that said that. But yeah, there was funny times, you know. But then one day I kind of fell upon a place in the north of England, or north of London, sorry, a place called Charrington Street in King's Cross, and the whole street was squatted with hippie people, you know. And it was a nice environment. every house was painted different colours, and the doors were painted different colours, and everybody seemed to be happy, you know. And there was a place for me there. I found a room that I could take, you know, walk in and take it over.
Okay.
And I did that. I think it was another guy with me, you know. And yeah, we were in that environment, and it was a happy place. But along with the happiness and the joy, what gave most of us happiness was drugs. You know, so I started.
Yeah.
I started smoking cannabis, taking LSD, stuff like speed, and there was these downers called Tunol. But eventually, I started injecting those Tunol, you know, and getting hit straight away because I mainlined it, you know.
Yeah.
That type of thing, and I overdosed a few times.
Oh my word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
accidentally, because the drug that it was, you kind of never got enough of it,
Yeah.
and you think you had enough, and you'd be injecting.
You still want more.
You'd be
Yeah.
still injecting,
Yeah.
and that's what was happening, you know. And I actually overdosed about 5 times, and
Wow.
yeah,
God,
on
that's
different
been good.
occasions. Yeah.
It's keeping you alive. Yeah. Yeah.
There was one interesting time. I always mention this because I really see God's hand in this. Even when I was back then, I really believe that God had his hand on me in a peculiar type of way,
Yeah.
because he saved my life. He saved me from dying, you know.
I know.
And
5 times overdose.
each time someone found me overdosed, you know. But I remember one time. I'll give you two times. One time, I was staying with a friend of mine in another squat, you know,
Yeah.
and the people in the squat, they were students that lived there, you know, hippie students, and it was a long weekend, and the students decided to go home to their parents for that weekend, and me and this other guy, John, his name was, we had no parents to go to, so we just stay where we are, and we had plenty of drugs to take, and we were happy enough. And we stayed in this room we used to call it the common room, because that's where everyone used to hang out.
Yeah.
And there was papers thrown all over the place. You know, people would come in eating chips, fish and chips, and they'd just throw their papers around the place, you know. But there was all of that kind of a mess in this room. But these guys went home to their parents, and we were left in this room. And one of the guys who went home to visit his parents, he was a student, he decided that he remembered he forgot something,
Okay.
and he had to come back to the house to get it. And when he came back, he opened the front door, and he could smell smoke.
Oh wow.
And he opened the door that we were in, and the room was on fire.
Okay.
And he pulled us out of the fire. Now, we weren't born to be, if we had stayed there, if he hadn't come back, we would have been. And that's, I really see God's hand there,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
There was another time when another good friend of mine, he's passed away now, but he found me lying face down he looked out his window actually, and he saw me lying face down, and it was raining in like a garden outside of his house.
Yeah.
And I had overdosed, and he came down to help me, and him and another guy brought me upstairs, and they got the ambulance. Again, if he hadn't have seen me, I think I would have been dead, you know.
Yeah.
So there was a few
Yeah.
times like that, you know.
Yeah, but before you go ahead, there's something very intriguing. There's that concept that drugs is an expensive, how do you call that? Bad habit, basically. So from what I'm hearing, even though you were with no money, you had access to drug. How was that possible? Was he... Do you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
Yeah. How did we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now
that's
the thing
that's
is,
what we hear. Like
yeah, the
people are
only-
making a fortune selling drug to other people. So you would expect this to be something expensive to get. So I'm just curious to see how was that in those days. What was the drug scene like? Was it easy
Yeah.
to get drugs, or how was that possible?
It was
with
so
no
easy
money?
to get drugs, and
Okay.
the drug that like my favorite one was LSD. Now, you couldn't overdose on LSD apparently,
Okay.
because your brain will only trip. We used to call it tripping. You go on a trip for 8 hours, and you would only trip to so many 100 micrograms of LSD. You know, you wouldn't go any further. You couldn't take, if you took a load of it, you can only trip to so much.
Yeah.
So many, you know. Anyway, but they were for a microdot of LSD. It was only at the time was 50 pence. You know, it was cheap. For the other tablets that I used to get, it was you'd get 7 for £1.
Oh wow! I
Yeah.
mean, a pound in those days
Yeah.
were quite expensive
Yeah.
still. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for speed would be about the same.
Yeah.
But if you wanted heroin, you were talking about £20 for a little bag.
So we're talking about in the what 60s or
You're talking about 60s, yeah, in the
60s.
60s,
So
late
20
60s.
pounds in the 60s. That's
Yeah,
a lot of
it was
money.
a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
So I never took heroin, you know, because it was out of my reach.
Yeah.
You know, cannabis was the same. I mean, you would get a nice deal of cannabis for £5, you know, yeah. So it wasn't that expensive
Yeah.
back then, you know.
Okay.
There was a lot of it about. So that, you know, that's
Yeah.
how that's.
So fast forward a little bit in terms of you are okay now, obviously, yeah. But I want to know what was the process of coming out of addiction, because there are people still struggling to come out of it, right? So walk me through that journey of meeting your wife, or even be free, drug free. Yeah.
Well, when I met Kaz, my wife,
Yeah.
she was only a young girl as well. You know, she was just turning 17.
Yeah.
I'd say she might have been 16, just turning 17 when I met her. And she was actually living in London because she had come from Southampton to London, and she was living in the same environment. And one of the times I was after getting out of hospital because I had abscesses on my arms from injecting, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember my friend and her and him, we went to her where she was living, you know, and she took care of us, you know. She medically she used to bandage our arms, and I remember she washed my hair. I had long hair at the time, you know, and yeah, so we kind of fell for each other,
Okay.
you know, and like Kaz, she used to take LSD as well and speed and stuff,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But at the time we fell in love, and we moved to another part of London, not too far away from where we were, but we moved to another hippie commune,
Yeah.
and she lost a baby. She became pregnant and she had a miscarriage because of speed. She used to take speed, and then when she was pregnant the second time, again, we had no common sense.
Yeah.
And again, I think God's hand was here because he said, like, we just decided, let's get out. We'll have to get out of here if we're going to have a baby. And so I got in touch with my mother and I said, look, we want to come back to Ireland, you know.
Okay.
And so we came back to Ireland. We moved back to my father's house.
And was he still alive?
He was still alive, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Very much alive. He was still sick, but he was on medication.
Okay.
So
much
he was
better.
quiet for a time. But again, it didn't work out.
Right.
We didn't get on, and he kicked us out. And Kaz was very much pregnant at this stage. And a friend of mine took us both in. And the friend that took us in, he had 11, I think there was 11 of them, brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And they let Kaz sleep upstairs in his room, and me and him slept under the stairs in their house. It was only a small house, you know.
Wow.
And then when Kaz was due to give birth, the woman of the house wouldn't get an ambulance because she was ashamed to bring the ambulance to the house, because back then an unmarried mother
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
was looked down upon,
Okay.
you know? Yeah. So myself and my friend, we had to go to the nearest bus stop, and we got the 27A bus into Gardiner Street. And we walked from Gardiner Street all the way up to Parnell Street where the Rotunda Hospital was. And she was in labour at this stage, you know, and she could hardly move, you know, and we got her there. and we left her at the hospital. And she would have to tell you herself, they didn't treat her very well, you know,
Of
because
course,
she
yeah.
was an unmarried mother
Yeah,
and she
yeah,
was
those days,
young.
yeah.
Yeah. Our baby was born. Now at this time, I wasn't taking drugs, but I was taking whiskey. I used to
Oh,
drink
wow.
whiskey.
So it's kind of like a
Yeah,
compensation because your body is used to wanting something, is it?
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
okay.
Yeah. So I was drinking a lot of whiskey, and because I didn't know where to score drugs back here in Dublin. Like drugs wasn't plentiful back here,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
unless you knew somebody, and we didn't know anybody,
yeah.
you know, in that scene. Um, so our baby was born, and we came back to my friend's house with the baby, and then because of me drinking whiskey and stuff, I had a row with the man of the house, my friend's father, and he turfed us out. And now we were on the streets with the baby. Um, I went and begged my mother to take us back, and she was afraid to, you know. And my father, he wasn't well now at this stage. He was gone a bit crazy again, you know.
And there was a baby
And
involved
there was
and
a baby
everything, yeah.
involved. So now my father was very well known by the priests, the Catholic priests, and he used to collect the money every week from door to door, you know, these envelopes for the church
Yeah, yeah,
supporting.
yeah.
And we went to the parish priest of that parish, you know, and he was living in a house, in a housing estate, the priest was. And the priest wouldn't, we went with the baby, we told him we were homeless, can you help us? And he didn't believe our story. He didn't believe that my father, Jerry Brown, would do such a thing as to throw us out on the streets. And he closed the door. And the priest next door, next door to him, he was only a young man. I remember his name. We used to call him Father Tommy Monaghan. That was his name. And he called us in. And he
Okay.
says, "Look, you can stay here tonight, you know."
Okay.
So he let us stay in his house, in his sitting room. He let us sleep on the floor. He got cushions and stuff, and the baby was with us. But the next morning, he came to us with a peculiar
Request?
request. And he said the couple next door to him couldn't have any children. And they wanted to buy our baby. And we were kind of shocked at this.
Yeah.
And when I think about it now, we must have looked like we didn't deserve to have a child because of our image.
Yeah.
We didn't look capable of having a child, you know, of raising a child. So they were trying to rescue the baby, I presume, from us and give the baby a proper home, you know. That was the idea. I don't know how much money they were willing to give us, but we didn't even ask. We just shut it down straight away.
Okay.
And we decided, no, we're not giving our baby up, you know. And we wanted to be together as a family. We still had that intelligence, you know.
To know that we want a family. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so we decided. He gave us money. The priest gave us money to go back to England,
Oh, okay.
and we got as far as the boat, and we didn't have enough money to get on the boat. And here we were again, snookered. What are we going to do? So we came back again to Coolock village, and we went to another priest who helped us. He directed us to a place called Artane, and there was a woman living there who had a whole house to herself, and she took us in. And we lived with her for a few months. And again, things didn't work out. I think it was all because of me, you know. I was an angry young man at the time, you know. And
I can imagine.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we left there. We decided to leave her house and say, we went to Dublin Corporation and we says, look, let's just take a chance. We'll go to them and tell them that we're homeless. Now we kind of knew that there was a possibility of the baby being taken from us.
Yeah.
So we just took a chance. And we went to corporation and we sat there all day waiting to be seen. And when they did see us, They gave us the keys to a premises in 3B Lower Sean McDermott Street. Now this place was kind of dilapidated, you know, it was in a bad place,
Place,
bad
yeah.
way, yeah.
Yeah.
There was people living there, but the place was condemned, you know, apparently, you know. And we ended up being there, and we had to go to the corporation yard for them to bring us there, you know.
Yeah.
And they brought us, and they had to pull the corrugated iron off the door, not the front door, but our door of our
Yeah.
apartment,
Yeah.
to let us in. And when they opened the door, you walked into a big room with a high ceiling, and the windows were broken. There was no fireplace. It was just like a horrible place, a damp place. And they says, well, this is it, you know. And I remember getting a lump in my throat and wanting to cry, and asking myself the question, why did I come back to this country? You know?
Okay. Yeah.
You know? But anyway, cut a long story short, the corporation guys felt sorry for us, and they got us a bed, and they came out the next day and they fixed the windows, and they did what they could to facilitate us, you know.
Okay.
And then Kaz, of course, being the woman that she is, she made the place look pretty, you know, and people gave us bits of furniture and stuff like that, you know, and we were fine. We got wallpaper, and we put wallpaper up, and
Yeah.
you know, and we were living there, and we still weren't married, you know, at this stage. And one night there was a knock on the door, and there was two people at the door, a guy called Tommy Slattery and another girl with him, Elizabeth Hackett, her name was, and they came from a church, Grace Baptist Church,
Okay.
in town, in the city of Dublin. And they were nice people, and we let them in, and we were talking, and they were telling us about Jesus.
Yeah.
And they used the term born again,
And that's back in the 60s,
that's
yeah?
back in the 60s, yeah. Well, 70s now.
70s,
70s,
yeah.
yeah.
Like you're talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah, this is back in the 70s.
non-Catholic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
This
that's
is-
interesting.
it was actually-
I really get fascinated every
Yeah.
time I hear that, because there was a misconception
Yeah.
of Ireland being strictly Catholic, and you could not even dare bring any conversation that was not.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I grew up my grandmother, she was a devout Catholic, and she would say the rosary every evening, you know. And
Yeah.
we were
yeah.
told that if you crossed your foot across the Catholic or the Protestant church, you were going into the territory of the devil.
Yes.
This
yeah.
was actually bred into us, you know,
Yeah.
as Catholics, you know.
Believe it or not, my grandmother was the same. She
Yeah.
was very upset when my mom became a born-again Christian. So
Yeah.
it's all over the world. Like
Yeah.
Catholicism, if you step away from the religion, it was like you committed the crime of the
Yeah.
century. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. At those days, like it's not the same anymore, but those days was really that
Yeah.
serious. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And even back then, even when we were going through a rough time, I had, what would you say? I had this picture of Jesus. And that was the picture in my head of my grandmother used to have a picture called a Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
Most Catholic families would have it on their walls. You
With
know?
that little heart in the
Yeah,
middle. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the one, yeah, the Sacred Heart. And so that was my picture of God, you know. And I knew He existed, but I knew that if I died, I knew I was going to hell for some reason or other. I knew I wasn't going to get into heaven. I knew that. I had that deep insight, you know. But anyway, these two guys that came in and
house,
was telling us about Jesus, and we didn't understand what they were trying to tell us, to be honest with you. But we liked what they were saying.
Yeah.
And we liked them. They were nice people. And we weren't very used to meeting kind of nice people like,
yeah.
like that, you know. So they, we liked them so much that we invited them back next Monday night. Do you want to come around again? So for months, this went on for months. They used to come around every month. And I think they might have been getting a bit exasperated because we weren't getting it. The penny wasn't dropping, or should I
But
say,
you were just
the Holy
having
Spirit
the fact
wasn't-
to have nice people coming over
Yeah.
and you're just happy.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't care.
Yeah, they were nice guys, you know.
Oh my God.
Our baby at the time, she was in hospital
Okay.
at this time she had gastric enteritis, and I think it was the environment that we lived in, like the place when you walked in the front door of that building. you would get the smell of urine and baby nappies, thrown on the stairs, and that type of thing. So that was, I think, it wasn't a very clean, except for our little pad, our little flat that Kaz kept spotless, So the baby was in hospital, and they says, why don't you go away for the weekend, and we said, we don't know where to go. We'd love to go camping, but we don't have a tent. And he lent me a tent. Tommy lent me a tent. And we were kind of surprised with that as well, because someone lending us a tent, and trusting us with a piece of equipment like that. And then he told me about this ship that goes around the world, a ship called the Logos.
Okay.
And he says, everybody on the ship are Christians. They're all Christians. And they go around the world and they bring the gospel to different countries.
Okay. Never heard of that. Actually.
Have you not?
No.
Oh, yeah. It's an organization called Operation Mobilization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he says, if you might be interested in going onto the ship and visiting it, So I promised him that I would. So we went camping that weekend. We came home, and at this time I was doing a course in a place called Anco Training Centre in Ballyfermot. And I remember going from there, coming home, and I was getting £30 a week, and we were able to feed ourselves. We were.
Wow.
We were able to. It was great. It was a lot of money, because we used to go into town at the shop, and we'd be delighted with ourselves. With a basket of food.
Yeah.
And
£30.
Here
wow.
we are. Yeah. It was a lot of money, back then, and we were able to feed our baby. But anyway, I remember coming home that evening, getting paid off Anco, and I scored a bit of dope, a bit of smoke, and I had it in my
So
pocket.
it wasn't gone, really?
No.
Yeah.
Like it was, dope was scarce, to get.
Yeah.
And there was a guy in Anco who was able to supply. Now, it was a once-off, type of thing. So I grabbed it, a nice one, I thought, Kaz would be delighted,
Yeah.
And I remember coming home anyway. Oh, yeah. I went onto the ship. And I was looking, when you went into the ship, like they had a book exhibition, laid out. And I was looking at the books. Now, I don't know why I was doing that, because I couldn't read.
I was just going to say, you didn't go to school, did you?
I couldn't read, you know what I mean? I couldn't bear, the basic stuff, And this guy walked over to me. He was an American guy. And he says, are you looking for anything in particular? And I says, no. So he says, how did you come to know about the ship? And I told him about this nice guy, Tommy, who used to come around to me every Monday evening. And he says, well, who was this guy? And I says, he's a Christian, I says. And he says, are you a Christian? And I says, yeah, sure I am. I made my communion, I made my confirmation.
Yes.
So I was a Christian,
yes.
Ticked all the boxes.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So I says, but there's something about Tommy, I says. And it really, I tell this story all the time, and there was something about this guy, there was and it was Jesus, of course, in him, and the girl that used to come in him. There were shining people, you know what I mean? There was something about them. And I knew that I wasn't a Christian like that. I knew that he had something up on me, And I says, there's something about this guy. I says, there's something nice about this guy. He's got something special. And his question to me then was, how would you like to become a Christian like Tommy? Strange question.
Yeah.
And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, well, if it's going to make me as nice as him, I wouldn't mind being like that. That was my
what a
take.
good testimony.
That was my take on it.
Yeah.
And,
it's a good testimony on Tommy, because then you could see something different in him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
His kindness, his patience, and something different. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was a gentle guy. He still is.
Yeah.
And so he says, and I says, yeah, I'd like that. He says, well, then he says, how would you like to become a Christian like Tommy right now? Now, I didn't know where this was going, you know, I didn't know where this conversation was going to go. And
How did you feel? Were you panicking like,
well,
what is
I
going
was
on
sort of,
here?
I was thinking, what's going to happen? What's next?
Yeah,
What's he going
is
to
it going to
do?
put some
You know,
whatever on me?
yeah, you know, what's he going to do? So
Yeah.
I said, yeah.
Okay.
And he brought me into this little room. I remember looking out the porthole of the room, and I was looking across at the other side of the Liffey, you know, where they were docked, you know. And he took out this Bible, and he says, I'm going to share a verse from the scriptures, he says, from the Bible. And he says, he used this term, he says, a girlfriend showed me this verse a few years ago. He says, and this is how I became to know Jesus. And, excuse me, just a...
That's fine. Yeah.
So he read that famous verse in Revelation 3:20, you know, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and dine with him and he with me. And he says, Jesus, he says, is knocking on the door of your heart. And he says, it's up to you to open that door and let him in. Do you
Yeah.
want to do that? He says. And I thought about it, the whole thing, and sorry, I did think about it, and that Sacred Heart picture came into my mind, you know that, and I thought about Jesus in a real way, and I closed my eyes. He says, "You can do it right now. Let him in," and he says, "I'm going to pray quietly," and I focused and I asked my understanding of Jesus, who Jesus was. I asked him into my heart. And as soon as I did that, Elena, everything that Tommy had been telling me all those months, everything fell into place. Wow. I knew, I got it. I understood what born again kind of meant, you know. And I really felt a joy. And I didn't see any flashes of light or anything like that, but I felt a remarkable joy.
A sense of peace.
Yeah, in my heart. And I couldn't wait to tell Tommy, you know, and I knew that Tommy was in his church that evening. They were having some kind of a coffee evening or something like that. And I was never in this church before, but I knew where it was. And Tommy had always invited me there, you know, and I never went. But yeah, so the first thing I did when I got off the ship, I ran. With joy in my heart, I ran to this place, this Tommy's church, in that street. I forget the name of the street, would you believe? And I go there every week. Anyway, I went in, and there was a room full of people, you know, and Tommy was there, and I went over to Tommy, and I told him what happened, and he said to me, "Do you see all these people here?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Those people have been praying for you and Cass, you know, all those months they've been praying for you." And I could almost see Tommy welling, you know, but and then I was faced with a problem because Kaz didn't know what I knew, you know, and I had to tell her. And the reason why I was faced with a problem was because we were supposed to be getting married in 2 weeks' time.
Okay.
Because while we were staying in Sean McDermott Street, the priest in Sean McDermott Street was giving Kaz catechism lessons.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Getting her ready for marriage, you
For
know,
yeah.
to become part of the Catholic Church.
Yes,
you know, because she wasn't Catholic, you know. Oh, wow. And she didn't have anyone to give her away either, you know, like as a father figure, you know.
Yeah.
So we were going to him every week as well, this priest, to get ready for marriage. And I knew in my heart, because I remember during the months that Tommy came around to me, he would show scripture, and I would be throwing stuff at him from a Catholic point of view, you know, as much as I knew.
Yeah.
And he would be able to show me in scripture where that wasn't true, you know?
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
And so I kind of knew that there was something amiss here, and I knew that I couldn't become I knew I couldn't get married in the Catholic Church, because if I did, I knew that you had to give allegiance to and swear that you were going to bring your children up in. I knew that bit. So that was my problem now, and I had to go back and face Kaz. Now, that weekend, my father wasn't at home. He was away. I don't know where he was, but we had decided to go out and stay with my mother that weekend, you see. So I said to Tommy, I've got to tell Kaz about this. And he says, well, I'll drive you home. And he drove me home that night, and he pulled up, and before I went into the house, he prayed, you know, for me. And I remember going into the house and I went to Kaz. We were in bed, and I remember saying to Kaz, I told her exactly what happened, you know, and she listened carefully, and I told her. And Tommy's prayers were answered, because she said, well, I want to do the same. And,
wow.
Yeah. And
that is powerful.
Yeah.
That is good.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And so she gave her life to the Lord that night. And now the two of us were on one page, and, you know.
Now you can face the marriage.
All we had to do was face the priest, you know,
Yeah.
and my parents, my mother, you know, and my father. So what happened was we went and told the priest first, you know, that we couldn't get married, and he actually hit the roof. He was very annoyed, and I could see it from his point of view. He put a lot into us, you know. And the St. Vincent de Paul, have you heard of St. Vincent de Paul?
Yeah.
They actually gave us our wedding ring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they gave us a voucher to get the wedding ring in a pawn shop up in I forget the name of Capel Street, I think it is. Anyway, but we still, that's the wedding ring that's on Kaz's hand now, you know?
Yeah.
And when we told St. Vincent de Paul that we weren't getting married in the Catholic Church, I says, do you want the ring back? And they said, no. But they were very disappointed with us as well. They thought we did a terrible thing.
Yeah.
You know, a terrible thing. And it was like blasphemy, you know, to them. You know? But the priest, funny enough, this is the thing, right? Tommy, when we told Tommy, we told him about the priest, and my pastor at the time, Chris Robinson, him and Tommy and myself, we used to go down to the priest and try and explain to him why Pat and Kaz weren't getting married in his church from the scriptures. And that man was touched. The priest was, he was listening, you know, he listened. And he tried, to the best of his ability, he tried to argue, you know. So I didn't have enough knowledge to be able to, you know, defend my belief, you know.
Yeah.
So Chris and Tommy did, you know, they had more knowledge of the scriptures. So they were able to present to him the real gospel message.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how true it is, but I remember, I remember calling to Tommy's house, Tommy Slattery's, Tommy Monaghan, or not Montgomery, the name of the priest. His name was Jerry McGuire, actually.
Yeah.
Jerry McGuire was his name. And I remember calling to his house one night, and his superior answered the door. And I said, is Father Tommy here? And he says, no, he's not here. He says, he's in hospital with an ulcer, and it's people like you that have him there. That's what he said to me.
Ooh,
you know?
Okay.
So, but I heard later, and I don't know how true it is, I heard that Tommy left the priesthood. Okay. I keep calling him Tommy because the other priest, his name was Tommy.
Yeah.
But
Jerry.
Jerry. I heard that he left the priesthood, and I don't know how true that is, you know.
You never seen him again?
Never seen him again. No.
Oh, shame.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to
Yeah.
know what happened to him.
Yeah.
Now, it's very intriguing
Yeah.
how people don't always believe it, but how when God has his hand on you, it's just all those things. When you look back, you can see God's hand. Because what is, like you talked about your times of overdose and how there was always someone coming out. We all know overdose. You don't survive overdose for that long, a lot of time.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
like a lot of, one, twice, a second time, third time, you're gone,
Yeah.
right? So God has. But what is more fascinating is how this group of people never gave up on you.
Yeah.
You didn't know that. They didn't tell you we are praying for you.
No.
But you only found out that they were praying for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And those hidden prayers
Yes.
that
Yeah.
like they let God do his job.
Yes.
So Tommy could have turned around and say, I've been sitting here every day with this guy every Monday and he didn't give his life, and then he goes on the boat and someone else.
Yeah.
But he was so focused on your soul and crying out to God with a group of people behind closed door
Sure. Yeah.
for your life. Do you see how powerful that is?
Yeah.
I always get fascinated about how God works better in those private moments.
Yeah. I know.
Do you know?
Do you know something
what
else?
I mean?
Yeah, and do you know something else? What hit me whenever I think about this? If I was the only person, or Kaz was the only two, if we were the only two people that got saved in Dublin that evening, okay? This is where, now I let my imagination run away with me sometimes. To think that, well, God is obviously behind that, and to think that to get me saved, right? Tommy knocked on my door every week, but to get me saved, God sent a shipload of people to Dublin for one man to bring that message to me in the way I could understand it.
Yeah.
You know, like it's I always think about that, you know, kind of.
And he took you out of your environment because you knew a different environment, a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
Going on the ship, like, it was very courageous as well, like to go in. But God kind of brought you in that environment where I think he's going to hear me here.
Yeah.
Sometimes as well, our environment stops us to do what we, like God, sometimes God say, I want to save you here, but I feel, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, I feel there are times where you just have to take you out of this place.
Yeah.
And say, I want his full attention here because I'm trying to reach out to him here.
Yeah.
Something, all right, let him get out of there. Because I think it has to be God to let you go on that ship.
Yeah,
I mean, it's different.
Yeah, I really believe.
And how did your grandparent feel? Your grandparent, because I read here, something was funny. I read your grandparents coming, anybody who comes into your house at a time of prayer will have to pray.
Yeah.
Most of this, whoever was in the house at the time, even if one was visiting, will be obliged to join in the prayer. It was so funny. I saw that. I was like, wow. That's my grandmother's.
Yeah, my grandmother. She would do this rosary thing every evening. And if anyone was visiting us, they would have to get down on their knees as well and do this. She was she was very religious. Yeah. But it was just religion, you know. Yeah. Now, they had passed away long before I got saved. Because I was a child when I left Ballinasloe. I was 13. Okay. But now I was in my 20s.
They passed away.
They did. Yeah, they passed away. Yeah. In fact, my grandmother had passed away, but my grandfather would have been still alive, but I didn't have any contact with him.
Oh, okay.
Until no, I didn't have any contact. I did once when I was about 18 before I met Kaz. I remember going to visit him, and I had long hair down my back, and he was lying in bed, and I went over to him, and I says, his name, we all call him Gussie, you know, Gussie. I says, it's me. They call me Patrick. It's me, Patrick. And he looked up at me and he smiled and he says, you're not Patrick. The long hair and
he didn't recognize,
his picture of Patrick was a different, you know?
I saw some nice pictures of you like the other day where you had short hair with a fish and all that.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. So that was Patrick in his mind, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to move on then, Kaz and I, we got married in Phibsborough Baptist Church.
Okay.
My parents wouldn't come to the wedding.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, because we were getting married in a Protestant church, you know. But they allowed my brothers and sisters to come along, you know. But they were only allowed to stay at the back, you know, of the church. That was a really happy day. Our wedding was humble. My best man, he had a better jacket than I did. And we swapped jackets on the day. We says, can I borrow yours?
Yes.
And we were wearing both. Velvet jackets was the thing, was the style.
Back then. Yes.
And his was in better condition, and we swapped jackets on the day. And,
that is so funny.
Actually, he was the one that saved me in London. He was the one that
Oh, okay.
that found me lying on my face down. His name was Mick Dunn. You know?
Okay.
He was the one that actually I was a bad influence on him as well. You know, 'cause he was a decent young guy when it was me that got him over to London. Him and another guy, and the other guy ended up overdosing on heroin.
Oh,
But I
shame.
feel when I think about it, it was my fault that I brought them out of they're decent. They were only teenagers when they came to London. I sort of brought them over to London. You know, I invited them over to, and I brought them into that scene. You know, into that
Yeah.
sort of environment. you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always kind of beat myself up when I think of the
About
guy that
that,
passed away
yeah.
was Tony Lynn.
And you never get a chance to,
Nah.
yeah, to get saved.
Yeah, but Mick was my best man at my wedding, and the funny thing about it was, yeah, we had, like I said, we got married in Phibsborough Baptist Church, and all the women of our church, Grace Baptist Church, they made sandwiches and buns and cakes, and we at the back of the hall of the church. It was a great,
Wow.
and we were so happy, Kaz and I, because we were married, you know, and my best man, he wouldn't give a speech. He was too shy, the guy, you know. He was a quiet guy. He says, "No, I'm
Yeah.
not getting up," you know.
Yeah.
You know, and
This is amazing. I just, so before, I'm going to kind of close this first part of this conversation, right? But I want to see, so we don't talk about the physical aspect of giving up the addiction. So do you see that God just kind of transformed you? Because it's very important to bring that.
now this is the thing, right? I don't believe I was ever addicted
Okay.
to drugs, you know.
Okay.
But I was addicted to the buzz of it,
All right.
to the high of it, you know. But I wasn't, and I could have been addicted. I had a choice, because I remember one time back then when I overdosed and ended up in the hospital. There was a student doctor in the hospital, and he said to me, "Do you want me to would you like me to register you?" In other words, what he was offering me,
To cleanse, yeah.
he was offering me a free pass to get my drugs in there was a chemist called Hall's Chemist in Piccadilly in London, and I used to go in there and get my syringes, you know.
Okay.
You can go in and buy your syringe, you know, and but he offered me this, and again I think God must have been there for me to give me the common sense to say no to him.
Oh, wow.
I said no, as much as I would like to have been a registered, like back then the term was called junkie. You would have been a registered junkie.
Oh, I see what
You
you
know,
mean.
you'd be
I
legal.
didn't know what he meant
Yeah,
by register. Okay.
registered, you know, so
Yeah.
and I said no. And so I don't believe I was ever addicted, but I was addicted to the buzz of it, you know. And so that's why when I couldn't get any, I wanted a buzz, and so that's why I used to drink whiskey.
Okay.
You know.
So there is a difference.
Oh, there is a difference.
Okay.
Like, I mean,
What's-
there's a difference. Okay, so now, you know, we deal with people in addiction now. You know,
We'll talk about that in the second part.
But
so I just want
it's
to.
a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
You know, their body is addicted to the actual drug, and they can't go without it.
That's
you know,
that's the part.
They need to have this drug just to make them feel better or feel normal. You know, I never felt like that.
So what's the fine line? Because I think is other than God holding your life, but I think it's fascinating for someone who is in the other side of it and see you say, okay, how do I know if I'm addicted? Or how do I know if I'm just doing the balls of it? And what's the draw? What's the line?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I knew I wasn't addicted. I never even thought about it, you know.
Okay.
I never even thought about addiction. But if I was addicted, I know my body would have been aching, you know, if I didn't have it. And I never
wow.
went to any of
Okay.
that. My body was never that way. It was my mind that craved it. I craved the buzz of it, the high of it, you know. And so there's a difference between, you know, the physical and the...
And do you think the physical comes to some people when they do that in excess?
Yeah.
Is it the excess of it that where the body becomes used to it?
And I believed, well, I think, like, it was a good job that I couldn't afford heroin.
Okay.
Because I think if I scored heroin, I would have been addicted.
Oh,
Because it's
right.
easy to get addicted
To heroin.
heroin, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
it's such a nice feeling. I did the closest I came to heroin. It wasn't actually heroin. I injected I forget the name of the drug, but that was the closest I ever came to it, and that was really nice. You know, and
It's the way if you feel and oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and so I couldn't afford it. So I would like with speed, the likes of speed, the high of that was just amazing. You felt so happy and so high and willing to do anything. You loved everybody, you know.
And any pain that you may have caused by whatever you're going through in your life, it seems like it's taking
Oh
it away.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
definitely, yeah.
instant?
It was a joy.
That's
It was a
yeah.
joy that you. It was a real
Okay.
high
Okay.
joy.
Wow.
You know, and
Okay.
nothing could put you in a bad mood. The only thing that would put you in a bad mood was the fact that you knew that, hang on, I have to come down off this stuff. And when you were coming down off it, then you would start getting depressed. So then what you would do to counteract that would be to smoke a few joints. Or else, in my case, I used to inject
Yeah.
myself with
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
drug called Tuinol.
Yeah.
And that was like a downer. So you go from one state of mind to another state of mind. For being so high and buzzy
Yeah.
to
Okay.
calm. And,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
And I liked the calm as well. I like that kind of feeling of being out of it, you know.
Yeah.
I know it's very hard to describe, but yeah.
Is the description is clear enough to understand that there's some level of pain that was in there already from you, like you went through in your childhood, and sometimes those drugs gives you that sense of you're free.
Yeah.
Those temporary moments of freedom, of joy, and it takes away that
Yeah.
feeling of pain, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really so shocked and surprised about the difference that you made just now between the physical addiction and then just like the buzz.
Yeah,
Nobody knows that because everybody classify you're a drug addict. You take drugs, you're a drug addict,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it's very, very interesting. So that means that it made it easy for you to step away.
To step away, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
Without
did.
having to go into rehab and all that
I
kind of
didn't
thing.
have to do that, no.
Wow.
I did end up in a psychiatric hospital before I met Kaz for taking too much LSD,
Yeah.
acid, you know. I did end up for a few weeks in Portrand, St. Edith's Hospital, you know.
In London?
No, in Dublin.
In Dublin, okay.
Yeah, because at one time I had come home.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
okay. Yeah.
And then I went back to England again. I told my mother I wouldn't take any more drugs, and sure, I did. I went back home again.
Yeah.
You know.
And then also you say that you got yourself into that because also the environment. So sometimes people don't wake up and say, I'm going to take drugs. Sometimes you're in the environment and,
Yeah.
oh, let me try.
Yeah,
You see?
of course.
Okay.
I didn't take it because I was feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah, it's more
I took
what's
it,
this? Yeah.
What's it like? What's it like? You heard so much about it, you know?
Yeah. And the guys around you were doing it.
Yeah.
In that place in
Yeah,
London. So
yeah,
you kind
yeah.
of, all
Yeah.
right. So I want to thank you for this first part of the conversation. It's a fascinating journey.
Before I finish, I forgot to mention that the piece of dope that I scored in Anco the night I was saved, I threw that in the water.
Oh, wow.
I was able to do that. That's the impact that had on me when I asked Jesus into my life. That I was able to throw something like that away. This is a luxury you're talking about. It was a luxury because it was so hard to get in Dublin. You know, a decent piece of cannabis. You know, and that was a luxury. That was a big thing to throw away. You know, and I was able to do that in an instant. You know, and I give that to God. I mean, only God can do that. Yeah, you know, because I wouldn't have done it. You know. So sorry for interrupting you.
This no, honestly, seriously, this part of the story is so fascinating. So I just want to say thank you for this part of the story. It's just so, wow, it's like a fairy tale, right? Yeah. I would suggest do a movie out of it. It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Now, thank you so much for sharing your life. So we're going to come back and discuss the aftermath of your activities and how you change in life through your story. Yeah. All right. Okay.